students, Daniel Boone here, back to teach you a little bit more about exploring the West. Now, let's point out right here that the Appalachian Mountains are right here, just to the west of where all of those first 13 original colonies were. Now, let's talk about cardinal directions for a minute here. Do you guys know about cardinal directions? Now, the cardinal directions are the main points on a compass. And when I talk about north, south, east, west, I just realized I don't know if Mr. Darcy taught you about that. So here we have north, and that's directly up. And that word cardinal means the most important. So the most important directions on a compass is our cardinal directions. So we have north that goes up. We have east that goes that way. We have west over here. Oops. And we have south down here. Now, when I was a boy, I remember west from east because it spells we. If it was backwards, it spelled ew, and we don't want to spell ew. It's spelled we. So west is over there, east is over here. You can also remember the directions by something called never eat soggy waffles. So if you remember this little funny thing, never eat soggy waffles, you'll know that it goes northeast, south, west. Now, where did I want to explore? I wanted to explore that way, right, which is to the west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, remember, I couldn't explore west because we didn't know how to get over the Appalachian Mountains, which leads us to a new term called trailblazers. Now, there's two words in trailblazers, isn't there? That's called a compound word, right? We have trail and blaze. A trail is something you take, a path to get to somewhere. Now, blaze can have two meanings. One is like a blaze of a fire, right? But in this case, we mean a blaze like somebody who creates something. So a trailblazer was somebody who created trails for people to get places. One of the most famous trailblazers you will ever know is somebody named Daniel Boone. That's right, I was a famous trailblazer, meaning that I created trails to take people places. Where do you think I'm going to create a trail to take people? You'll have to listen to find out. All right, here we go. Daniel Boone continued to explore the Appalachian Mountains, always on the lookout for a path that might lead him to the other side. One day, he was visited by an old friend, John Finley. As the two men talked, Daniel told John of his desire to find a way to cross the mountains. To his great surprise, Finley replied, "Why, I know a way. I've crossed the Appalachian Mountains myself." He told Daniel that he knew of several big gaps in the mountains. Ooh. Formed by rushing water years ago, the natural gaps or passes through the mountains had been trampled down first by buffalo and later by Native Americans. One pass was not too far from where Daniel Boone and his family lived. It's in Virginia, and it's called the Cumberland Gap, Finley told him. Repeat after me. Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap. Good job. It's an old Native American footpath. Boone was delighted. Yes, I was. He asked John Finley to show him how to find it. Not long after that, the two men set off with 4 other men on a big adventure to find the Cumberland Gap. They walked on and rode on horseback for many miles before reaching the beaten path that led up a steep side of the mountain. They spent long days climbing up and up and up. Daniel's skills as a woodsman helped him identify animal tracks and follow the Native Americans' footpath. Good thing I had those skills. They were overjoyed to reach the top of the mountains, where they could see a magnificent river stretching out beneath them. Following a narrow footpath, the men finally made it to the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, to the land that is now known as Kentucky. Daniel and his friends were pleased with what they had found on the other side of the mountains. The land was rich and fertile, and there were great herds of buffalo grazing on grasses. For the next 2 years, Daniel Boone stayed in eastern Kentucky, hunting and trapping wild animals. When he finally returned to North Carolina, he was met by other settlers who expressed an interest in leaving their homes in the east and moving westward. These pioneers asked Daniel if he could show them the way across the Appalachian Mountains. Now, a pioneer is someone who wants to explore or live in a place that they don't know very much about. But the pioneering spirit of these settlers remained strong. 2 years later, they convinced Daniel that they were serious about making the hard and dangerous trip to wilderness lands. And so, Daniel led his own family, along with several other families, back through the Cumberland Gap into Kentucky. However, the trip proved even harder for families than it had been for the woodsmen. The families were not used to living in the wild outdoors like the woodsmen. Setting up a settlement in Kentucky was more difficult than the pioneers expected, and they were forced to go back home over the Appalachian Mountains. Later, a businessman offered Daniel Boone a job to help widen some Native American trails that crossed the Appalachian Mountains. So he was going to take them to be small and widen them to be a lot bigger. He wanted Daniel to make the trails wider and clearer marked so that pioneers would not lose their way as they crossed the mountains. Daniel Boone, myself, became known as a trailblazer. He helped to open up the way for pioneers to move west. Daniel Boone gathered together a group of men to help him clear the forest through the wilderness. Together they worked through rain, snow, and mud. Their axes chopped down trees and bushes to widen the old Native American footpath so that the pioneers' wagons would fit. They built log bridges across streams. Daniel Boone and the men successfully cleared a trail from eastern Virginia through the Cumberland Gap and into Kentucky. The trail was originally Native American footpaths called the Great Warrior's Path. Later, it became known as Wilderness Road. Pioneers from Virginia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania began to move along the Wilderness Road in great numbers. By the time that Kentucky was declared a state, less than 20 years after the trail was widened, more than 100,000 people had crossed or had used the Wilderness Road. Daniel Boone's hard work was responsible for opening up the area known as the West to many pioneers. As more and more settlers streamed into the West, relationships with the Native Americans who were already living there became even more strained. Daniel Boone's own family was the first pioneer family to settle in Kentucky. Daniel chose a spot near the Kentucky River to build a fort. It took several years to complete the fort. About as large as one city block, the fort sheltered log cabins and the people that lived in them. The fort was named Boonesboro, after Daniel Boone, the man who built it. Myself, Boonesboro. Now here's a picture of me when I'm older. Life was difficult for the pioneers in the beginning, but people kept streaming across the mountains. In fact, so many people came that Daniel Boone felt his wilderness was being destroyed. It was no longer a wilderness land. He never gave up his love for the wilderness and continued to explore lands to the west of Kentucky until his death at the age of 86. Wow, I lived a long time. 86 is a good life. Well, I'll tell you, I did love the wilderness, and then I made the way. I widened the roads and became a trailblazer for all these people to come. And it didn't feel like the wilderness so much anymore because so many people came. Kind of made it a little too crowded for me. So I kept exploring and exploring and exploring until I died. So that's the life of me, Daniel Boone. Do you want to know more about me? Well, we're going to fill in a blank in our core folder right now. Go ahead and grab this guy, and we're going to open it up, and you'll see that there's a little packet in here. Let's pull that out, and And the first page is a fill in the blank. So you'll notice that some of them are squares, some are rectangles, and some go up high and some go down low. That's the letters. So if it's a bigger letter, it'll go in the bigger one. That kind of gives you a clue which one might go in here. Now, I don't believe you're going to use all of these words, just some of them. But you're going to use these words in the bottom. This is your word bank to fill in your answers. So number 1 would be the Cumberland Gap was formed by. Do you remember what the Cumberland Gap was formed by? Was it formed by rushing water? Volcanoes? What do you think? Read all of these and fill in the one that might work. It's probably not volcanoes because volcanoes isn't 2 words and wouldn't fit. You'll do that with all of these on here. The second page is just a picture of me with my awesome blossom raccoon hat here, yeah. And you can color that, and I've also got my mustache. So color that. I'd love to see how beautiful you color this. You can use markers if you'd like. And send it to Miss Darcy on homeroom so that she can see it and let me see it, all right? All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow where I teach you more about the exploration of the West. Goodbye.